Okay, so today we are going to tie a variation of a dry skunk. I first got this fly, actually bought it at Gates Lodge. It was in the fly bins, and they kept this in the bins for a couple seasons, and then they just stopped. And I was like, Josh, where's that fly? And he's like, oh, we didn't buy any more. And I was kind of freaking out because this fly is like, this was my best fly. So I had a couple left from the year before, and I dissected one, figured out how to tie it, and this is, like I said, this is my best fly. Honestly, I'm not even sure I want to share this video with people because you can't not catch fish with this fly. If you go fishing with this fly and you don't catch fish, just quit fishing. So it's just a skunk variation. The ingredients, so for the recipe we've got a foam body. And so what I do is I pre-cut foam, and I pre-cut the legs. You can see here I've got this big, this bag, and I cut cut for probably 100 flies. So I pre-cut the bodies, I pre-cut the legs, and then whenever I feel like tying, I'll cut them. And so how big to cut the foam? Great question. So I cut the foam so it's one hook length plus the gap. So the way that'll end up once it's tied in, we'll tie it in right even with the top of the eye right there. And then it's going to hang off, basically it's going to hang off the back end, kind of a little extended body action going on, about a hook gap out over the end. How long do we cut the legs? Great question. So here's a leg. So this is 2 hooks plus a gap. So there's 1 hook, there's 2 hooks, and a gap. So I'll cut a bunch of legs up, I'll cut a bunch of bodies up like I was saying, and then when I feel like tying a fly, I've got them ready to go. What else do we need for this fly? So we need a wing. This fly has a deer hair wing. I actually like elk cock hair, kind of like the same type of hair you would use for an elk hair caddis. So there's that. What else do we got? Dry fly hooks. So my favorite size for this fly is a 16 Daiichi 1180. I've been a big fan of the Daiichi 1180s for as long as I've been tying. Rusty got me hooked on them. Rusty Gates from Gates Lodge, and you know that's what he carried, and so that's what she used. Thread, we're going to use brown 6/0 thread. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh, hackle. Just your typical hackle sized for a 16 fly. So if you've never sized hackle before, as a general rule of thumb, you want your hackle length to be 1.5 times the gap of the hook. So you can just bend that hackle around the hook like that, and you can see how it kind of stands up. And so there we go. This is pretty close. If it's not exactly 1.5, if it's 1 1/4, if it's 1 3/4, if it's 2, if it's 2.5, the fish aren't going to care. But if you're tying for yourself a little bit, you know, you want it to look pretty. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start our thread, and we're going to put a thread base down. So we're just going to start just behind the eye there, and we're going to take side-by-side thread wraps all the way to a point just above the barb of the hook. Man, I can't believe I'm sharing this fly with people. So we'll cut that there. So we're all set. We've got a thread base. Now why do we tie this thread base? Like, why don't we just tie our stuff right onto the bare hook? Well, the reason for that is we kind of want some traction on that hook, so that when we start tying things on, they stay put. So we're going to take our body, like I was saying before, we'll line it up right with the front. You know, you might be tempted to move it back so you're not crowded the eye, but I like to crowd the eye a little bit on this. I want this to be up because when I tie that last thread wrap in, this end of the foam is going to kind of sit proud, and that'll expose that eye for me. So I'm just going to take a couple wraps here at the back, and I'm going to come up, take a couple wraps, come up, take a couple wraps. So right about here, actually a little bit further back. I want to be right in the middle of that shank, the hook shank. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty close to the middle. And now I'm going to basically compress this whole front end. But I don't want to fully compress it, because the reason foam floats so well is because there's tiny little air bubbles or pockets of air in between the foam in here. And so I'm going to squeeze it down, but I don't want to completely squeeze out those air pockets, because those air pockets are what's going to help this fly float so well. You can see that front end standing up, so that's good. This eye's completely exposed. It'll be easy to tie my whatever knot I'm tying to tie this onto the end of my leader or tippet. And so now I'm ready to tie the legs in. And I want to tie these wings, and I'm going to actually come back to that midway point. And that's where I'm going to tie those legs in at. So first leg, you can do the far side or the near side, whichever one you want to do first. Doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to take one wrap, kind of hold that leg in position, grab my other leg, man, I can spin this up if I want. I'll just kind of pin that there, come around, take a couple wraps, kind of get it sized up so that my legs are, on the sides. We don't want these legs to roll around to the bottom, or what might happen is the one that's closest to us might roll up to the top. And the reason that they roll in that clockwise direction is because the thread is what is going to pull them over as I make those wraps. And so one way we can kind of prevent that, we can, that's the direction we pull this thread as we're tying the fly. So if I keep my thread real tight as I come around, it's going to pull those things around. If I kind of take a loose thread and then pull like this, I actually like to pull kind of down and towards myself. Things won't move around much. So the other thing you can do, so from that first wrap I did that was real tight when I was showing you what not to do, it kind of pulled these. And so let's say you do that. So all I need to do to fix them, I've got some tight wraps there. I can just bring them back where I want them, and I can position those precisely where I want those to be. I might want them up kind of at a funky angle. That way those back legs are deeper in the water when this fly's floating. I might want them perfectly flat so they both ride kind of in the meniscus or the film on top of the water. I might want them up a little bit. I might want them both down. That's up to you. I typically want them both flat. Fairly flat. They don't need to be perfect. So there's my legs. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tie my wing in. So I've got my elk cock here. For the sake of time in this video, I'm just going to even the tips of this hair up with my fingers. But if you wanted a perfect fly, you could throw this hair in a hair stacker. So there's my wing clump. How big is that clump? So if I compressed all this stuff down, it's about the same size as that piece of foam. Kind of round. So the tips are fairly close to one another, so I'm not going to get too picky. I'm going to bring those tips so they're even kind of just hanging over the back of the fly. And I'm going to transition that over. And I'm going to kind of grab these legs. Let me grab these legs and kind of fold them back like that. There we go. There we go. So I'm going to take a couple loose wraps, and then I'm going to pull. I'm coming towards myself and kind of down at an angle. I don't want to pull so hard that I break the thread. And then I'll do a third wrap, kind of do the same thing. And as I come over the top, I'm nice and loose, and all my tension on the thread comes right there when I come and pull tight towards myself. So I've got, 3 or 4 wraps on there. Maybe one more would be good. Don't really need it, but, oops, sorry about that. Don't really need it, but it's good. Good to feel good about your fly, I guess. So then I can come up, kind of trim this up a little bit. And same deal like the foam. These hairs are semi-hollow. These aren't as hollow as like a deer body hair would be that you would use for like bass poppers and that kind of fly, but they're semi-hollow. So we're gonna compress those down here in a second, and then we're gonna tie our. But before we do that, we're gonna tie our hackle in. So I got my hackle. This is a saddle hackle, so it's it's pretty long. Gonna come in at the base here, strip off the ends, and I'm gonna come in that same spot. Take a couple wraps so it's nice and solid. And I'm going to pull those legs back again, and I'm going to come over top of that head. And what I'm doing as I make these wraps, I'm coming forward, and I'm good. So the ones that are down are down. Now I can take and I can just trim these extra ones. They don't really need to be there. If you don't want to trim them, you don't have to. The fly is still going to work. I don't like those guys right there. I'm going to get those. There. Alright. So now I'm going to take, my first wrap is going to be between the legs. And I think I can squeeze another one in there. Maybe 3, who knows. 4. I'm kind of coming up. As I come up, it's kind of spreading these legs out a little bit. That's probably good. And now I'm going to pull the legs out of my way, and I'm going to come in front of the legs. And as I do that, I just take my left hand, grab both legs, take my right hand, wrap the hackle, let the legs go, switch to my left, re-grab with my right, grab the legs, come up, and I'm going to come right to where my thread is. And when I get there, I'm going to come around the bottom, and then I'm going to take my thread while I'm holding the hackle with my right hand. I take my bobbin and I bring it over with my left for that first wrap. Now things are there. Now I'll take 3, 4, 5 wraps just to secure the end of this hackle. And then I'll come in, tie my hackle, set that aside. It's good for the next fly. Come back to my side here, kind of square things up. My legs moved a little bit on me. So now I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to pull that head back. And just kind of lift it up. And that's where I'm going to whip finish my fly at, is under that foam, tight behind the eye. So I'll take my whip finish tool, come up with the hook, come around the shoulder there, and I've got this kind of triangle going on. I'll pull some slack in. I'm going to take my left hand, pull those legs out of the way, and I'm going to whip finish behind that eye. Now, this might be tricky for some people, so if you're not comfortable with that, pull that tight. You can also whip finish behind the foam, right where you tied that foam off. Same deal. With your left hand, grab these 2 legs. Get that back behind the foam there. And I can come back behind that foam, right in front of where the hackle finished. Take my 3, 4, 5 wraps, and whip finish that way. Bust that thread off, that's okay. Kind of trim, proper it up. So there's our fly. So this fly, like I said, I'm probably going to regret sharing this, even though it's not like a secret fly. There's probably lots of guys using this fly, but take this fly to any Pigeon River Country stream, any trout stream in northern Michigan or the UP, and I guarantee you're going to have a really fun afternoon on the water.